Here we have the second iteration of the Dell XPS 15 9560. Much like its predecessor, the 9550. Quad-core CPU, dedicated graphics, 16 gigabytes of RAM, infinity display. Wait, hold on. What? Actually, this is the XPS 15. Not like the XPS 1210 from 2007. Here we go. Our review of the XPS 9560. The XPS 15 is like no other, well except the XPS 13, which is a much smaller version. What's really superb about this laptop is the fact that it uses a bezel-less display, quite unbelievable. And as you can see here, as we power the device on for a Windows startup test, the Infinity Edge display really stands out compared to other laptops. Our unit comes with the 7700HQ quad-core processor, 16 gigabytes of DDR4 RAM, 512 gigabytes of PCIe NVMe storage, GTX 1050 graphics card, the killer 1535 wireless card, 97 watt-hour battery, and the infamous backlit keyboard with Fingerprint Reader. One of the main benefits of the XPS 15 is the port selection. It has one HDMI 1.4 port, two USB 3.0 ports, a Thunderbolt port with only 2 lanes of PCI Express, 3 USB 3.1 Gen 2 ports, a full-size SD card reader, and let's not forget the Kensington lock slot. Because I spend most of my time in the Chrome browser, I'm always curious to see what the Octane score is. The Octane score of my Acer Chromebook 15 sits around 14 to 15,000, and while this test run, it gives me the opportunity to talk about the positives and negatives of this computer. Negatives, I would say, is the keyboard travel. The keys have like 1.2 millimeters of travel. It's not quite a whole lot. Fingerprints on the carbon fiber surrounding the keyboard. As you can see here on the left-hand side, you can see some fingerprints by the keyboard. The Toshiba SSD, which is unlike the Samsung SSD that was shipped with the review units of other review channels. Positives include NVMe storage, the 1050 for light gaming, battery life up to 12 hours, and the display is super bright. And as the test ends, we can see the score is almost 40,000, mostly due to the quad-core processor that's in this machine. The Octane score doesn't give us a whole lot of information, but it does kind of give us a baseline on how fast this computer can browse the Chrome browser. We're going to do a graphics test here using Call of Duty Black Ops 3, running at 1080p, all settings on high. As you can see in the upper right-hand corner, the frames per second. Let's do this. Let's see how it does.
Will you hurt the doctor's feelings?
As we see here, the frames dip down to the 30s just for a second, but given that the game's running on high settings of 1080p resolution, it's not too bad. But let me go ahead and throw in some of the fan noise you may hear at keyboard level as you play games. One of the main issues that plagued the 9550 was coil line, and unfortunately the 9560 also has some form of coil line. As you can see in the video here, it is still present, and unfortunately sometimes it's rather annoying. Listen in as we test the speakers. They're somewhat tinny, very weak, but they will suffice. I'm happy to say that this machine has absolutely zero keyboard flex, which comes as a major problem to some other laptops, but the 9560, this is not an issue. As we move on to the 1080p IPS display, now this is not the 4K version, this is a 1080p IPS 60Hz panel. As we turn it side to side, there is absolutely zero loss of color, which is great. Unlike some of the old TN panels, the IPS display really performs well here. In fact, we're really happy with it. The only problem with it is the much complained about ghosting, which was present on the 9550. It is still present on the 9560, unfortunately. In conclusion, I want to go over some things to think about when you order a 9560. Number one is the audio port. Oftentimes doesn't work. It's commonly complained about on the forums, so make sure you test your audio port as soon as you receive your unit. Number two, the Toshiba SSD that is currently being shipped is not the Samsung 961, which was being shipped in the earlier units. It's about 1/3 the speed. That's very much complained about on the forums, and it is a very slow drive comparatively to the Samsung 961. Freezing within Windows is a common problem, but that's fixed by updating the Intel graphics drivers. And finally, if your unit wobbles as it sits on a flat desk, basically what you have to do is you have to grab the base with two hands and kind of torque it back and forth, and eventually it will sit flat on your desk. And if you enjoyed this video, hit like and subscribe.